People often feel mixed media can be hard, but I say it's so easy. That's why today I'm putting my husband up for the challenge, and he will be creating a mixed media project along with me. He's never done any type of art before, so I will be guiding him step by step. Do you think he can do it? Can he prove to you that mixed media is as easy as it seems? We're both working on a 6x12 canvas. And the first step is to cover the background using my digital collage printables that I sell on Etsy. Since the sheet is 8.5 by 11, it couldn't cover the length of the canvas. So instead of gluing it whole, I showed my husband that we can tear the page into pieces and glue it to the background using matte gel medium. I explained that it was not only important to apply the gel underneath the papers, but that he had to make sure he seals them on top as well. So when we add other wet mediums, it doesn't ruin them. My husband said this was a super easy step to do, but I felt this was the easiest part as I worried that the next few steps might be more challenging for him, as most people find stenciling and coloring hard to do on their first time. We dry our background really well as I explained to him this is a very important step for mixed media, as we're working in layers and we can't have any wetness underneath. Then we apply clear gesso with a brush. I explained to him that the reason we use clear gesso is because we don't want to cover the beautiful collage design we just created, but we need the gesso so the colors we add on top stick to the background. Since we have the gel medium underneath, the gel could resist the paint and we want to make sure it stays on. After we dry the gesso, the next step is to add texture, and this was the first step I worried about. I showed him my favorite way to add texture, which is to use modeling paste through a stencil, and I explained to him that the best way to add paste through a stencil is to spread a little bit at a time so the paste doesn't run underneath the design. I used the left side of the stencil to create my design, while my husband used the other side to create the mirror image, so when the two canvases are put together, the pattern is continuous across both canvases. However, this part worried me, as I wasn't sure if the two sides would look similar, and then the canvas would look lopsided. When it came to the focal point, my husband told me he wanted to do all the stenciling on his own. He used my petal stencil and added paste through it all over the heart, which I cut out of watercolor paper, as I knew it was thick enough to withstand any wet mediums without even being primed with gesso. Then we dried both canvases and heart really well, as the paste takes longer to dry, and if it stays wet, it will smush. Now it was time to add color, which is usually my favorite part, but it can be challenging for people as it is harder to control the colors. I wanted to see how my husband would fare in this step and whether he was up for the challenge. We start with the canvas by using two blue-toned Lindy's magical powders, which I added to a ceramic palette. The powder is mixed with water and turns into a vibrant watercolor. Then, using a small paintbrush, I add a little bit of color at a time to the edge of the canvas and spray it with water. The color drips down toward the center and creates a beautiful design around the stenciled area, so it's darker at the edges and lighter in the middle. Now it was the moment of truth, to see whether he could handle the messiness of mixed media. Since he was doing the mirror image of the canvas, he started applying it from the opposite edge and dripping the color down the center. He followed the same procedure, adding the light blue first and spraying it with water. And when he adds the darker blue, I tell him to spray less water. That way the color would be less diluted and look darker. At this point, I asked my husband if he found the coloring technique difficult to do, and he said it was easier than it looked, as I had given him clear explanations. This was important for me to hear, as this is the way I teach both in my in-person classes and to my YouTube and Patreon members. Signing up to my classes gives you the opportunity to learn mixed media step by step with clear instructions. My husband thought this was very important, especially because he had never done it before. And since he said the coloring wasn't as hard, he decided to be the one coloring the heart all by himself. So using a reddish color, he followed the same procedure starting from the edges. Since the heart wasn't primed, as we didn't add gel underneath, the watercolor was added directly on the paper. The stenciled area resisted the red, while the watercolor paper absorbed it. This created a beautiful two-toned effect where the heart became darker at the edges and lighter in the center. I also gave him a gold color, which I asked him to add around the edges of the heart. And after cutting the heart in half and gluing it on opposite sides of the canvas, he also added more gold around the outside of the heart, around the edges of the canvas, and even some gold on the wooden letters, which spelled love. Sometimes what we feel is overwhelming to do can become easy with clear instructions. But if you still worry about mixed media, then I have a video for you right here that might ease your worries with a few do's and don'ts mixed media tips on how to combine and apply certain products to your projects.